Arlington Public News is excited to be introducing a new series about adolescence over the coming months. Our topics will be wide-ranging, from bullying and cliques to texting and social media. To help us today is Laura Stamboni, an independent licensed social worker with private practice in Lexington, Massachusetts. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
I guess the first place to go in a discussion about adolescence is to adolescents. We probably all have relatively accurate ideas of what constitutes adolescence, but more particularly, is it a matter of age? Is it a matter of biology? Is it a matter of our maturation and thinking? What from a licensed social worker, what is adolescence?
Professionals have disagreed on what is considered adolescence, and there's been heated debate about it. One thing I will say is that the marker of the chronological age is not enough to be adolescence. It's really the transition after childhood and before adulthood, going into adulthood, in which there are physical changes and psychological changes that prepare the adolescent to move into adulthood. Right. That's really where I'm coming from on it.
So it's primarily moved by psychology as opposed to a child that becomes 10 and therefore is now in this new phase of growth called adolescence.
Well, I'd say that the biology part, there is a factor that is accurate in that, but it really needs to have both the physical and the psychological elements in order for it to be a true adolescence. As
adults in the lives of adolescents, how do we best temper, perhaps to some certain extent, the expectations that we have, perhaps from our childhoods, and how children should behave, and sort of accept this new reality that we find ourselves in?
A lot of times parents will come to me and say, you know, I really want to help my child. I really want to help my adolescents, more so actually. And one of the best things they can do, in addition to listen in a non-judgmental way and just be involved in their lives and be present when they needed to be, because parents are very busy, but taking that time is actually, you know, considering going to family counseling. And I say that because sometimes it's hard for parents to have conversations with their kids unless it's via text, you know, and it's better than nothing. And it's meeting them where they're at. They're texting. But sometimes parents need help in figuring out how to communicate their expectations, but also meet them, compromise with them, realize that some of their background is very helpful to raising their child, but that some of it may be very outdated and not in sync with their adolescent. And sometimes having to do that, sometimes you need to seek outside support. Parents are reluctant because sometimes they take it as it means they're a failure, but all parents feel like they're failures at some point. It's actually really admired to have parents say, you know, I want to learn how to better be there and be involved in my adolescence life.
Well, that's certainly one of the challenges nowadays, I think, where there are so many stressors. There are so many things that our kids have to navigate, and it would be natural, certainly, to want to protect them. Having some sense of the ramifications of it that perhaps our adolescent children don't have. But so is there any helpful guidance in terms of how do parents, how do caregivers provide, and there's probably not one stock response, regrettably, gosh darn it if there were, how do we protect without becoming overprotective of our adolescents who are actually in the very project of becoming more independent and pushing us away?
That's a difficult one. That's a difficult one because, again, parents care so much for their children, they just want to be involved and sometimes over-involved. You may have heard the term helicopter parenting, which literally swooping around the child, and that doesn't do any good for the child or the relationship between the, and I refer to child, but I mean adolescent and the parent. I think that you know, parents may not like this idea, but there is an element of having open discussions about difficult topics, saying, okay, we're entrusting that at your age, at 16, that you're going to go out with your friends, or 17, you have your license, and that you will be back at 8 o'clock, or 10, or whatever the time is. And so if they do it, then that's great. And you can reinforce that. I really appreciate that you showed up when you said you were going to come home. That means a lot. Now you have the kids, which is probably more frequent the case, they don't show up on time. But I think it's better to, in some of these areas, let them experience, make their mistake, and then learn, as opposed to the helicopter approach, which is, oh my gosh, I'm not going to let you learn because I'm afraid of what will happen if you make the wrong choice. Granted, yes, there are certain categories of, drinking alcohol, but again, educating them, but doing it in a family-friendly way, not in a, I'm going to lecture you and you're going to sit down as a student and I'm your teacher, because adolescents do not want to be lectured.
Yeah, sure. A sure way to have them tune out. But implicit then in your understanding of learn is fail. That is to say, to do something that you prefer they hadn't done, but that will help them ultimately truly understand the ideas. One of the things that I want to make sure we have an understanding, we can talk from a psychological standpoint, a biological standpoint about adolescence, but also about the project and the mission that is adolescence. There's some critical territory to be crossed by children who are going through it, by all of us who have come through it. What are the central features of the mission that is adolescence for children getting through that time?
There's many theories on what the missions are. Erik Erikson had a series of stages, which he said you needed to, I'm going to use the word master, the conflict before you move on to the next stage. And one of the areas in which adolescents are struggling with and trying to move through is identity, as well as independence. And so learning to make decisions where they see the consequences, they start to develop moral reasoning skills, abstract thinking. So these are skills that help them, because when they transition into adulthood, they're going to need to make these decisions about jobs, careers, college. You know, they also, it seems to be that they're very good at learning what to do and what not to do as they go further into their adolescent phase. And when they see people in their lives that are making good choices, and they talk to whoever the people, it could be parents, it could be mentors, and that they talk to the adolescents and tell them their process, how they made their decisions and came to their decisions. It can help the adolescent find a way to emulate, oh, well, so-and-so did it this way, so maybe this is something I need to try out. So their mission really is to move towards independence, autonomy, I mean, going off to college eventually, you know, cooking your own food, making your own bed, types of things like that, working, that's the goal for them. So it's a very tumultuous time, adolescence, but it can also be a really great time if you have the necessary supports. What in your practice, you see adolescent girls? Yeah, late adolescents. Later adolescent girls. What do you see at the risk of a top 10 list? What do you see the primary concerns that they're bringing to you, and are they representative, do you feel, of the concerns and the stresses that adolescents more generally are going through? In the community, you mean? Yeah. The types of issues, I do think that they are pretty reflective of the community in the sense of it's not, I bet you if you went to towns, surrounding towns, they would have similar issues. They may have a few others as well, but the ones that I see most in my practice are self-injury, so cutting. I see struggles with relationships with boyfriends, relationships with parents, family members, sexual identity, conflict about that. Bullying, I would say, is definitely in there. Trying to think. Pressure, social pressure from friends. Pressures and expectations to perform excellent academically, as well as manage that with their extracurricular activities, and manage that as well with their social activities. And it's a lot. I mean, it's not like back, when I was younger and we went outside and we kicked the ball around and we were in the backyard. I mean, some parents still try to do that, but how do you do that with limited time because of the schedule and the demand? So I think that's a big issue. And there's a list more, I'd say, but those are the ones that come to my mind.
Okay, all right. And in terms of any resources, people watching this segment, certainly one of the reasons we had the idea of introducing a series on adolescence is simply to have it enter the dialogue and for people to think further about it and their place in it as parents, as children themselves, as caregivers. What are there any resources that you can recommend? Just not a lengthy list, but just to start people out if they're interested in reading more, finding out more about adolescence, how we can make a positive contribution to that transformation.
Some of the ones that I have that I utilize most are NAMI, which is the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, and Massachusetts has a wonderful chapter. And if you go into their website, you will find a wealth of information on adolescents, adults, anxiety, depression, and supports. I believe that they have on their website where you can find supports and support groups, etc.
It strikes me, just given the titles of those, and it does stigmatize to a certain extent, yes?
Yes.
That health is a continuum, yes?
Yeah.
And we can occupy any numbers based on what exactly we're looking at on this continuum. And my concern would be that the National Association of the Mentally Ill becomes a hurdle that I don't think my child is mentally ill.
Yes.
I think they occupy a place on this continuum, and I'm interested in getting more information and helping them. But could that title be too much to get over?
Yeah. Well, and in that case, yes, it could be.
Yeah.
Also, too, I forgot to mention the National Institute of Health. Or the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay.
So again, mental health comes into the equation. But on the National Institute of Health, I believe, but don't know for sure, that there is information about health issues with adolescents. I don't know if they include mental health issues, but it sounds like a lot of the adolescents I work with, they do have mental health issues. And some of them are very normal mental health issues.
Exactly that.
And so seeing mental health, parents may, adolescents may think, oh, this means they're crazy or something like that. And actually, it's really saying, specifically the National Alliance for Mental Illness, it's just saying, there are health issues out there in the mental health domain, and take a look.
I mean, I think it's completely appropriate, certainly, to say that there's physical health and there's mental health.
Absolutely.
And we can have a variety.
And
yes?
sometimes they intermingle. Sometimes physical health affects mental health.
And
sometimes that's why the mental health issue comes up, is because of a compromised physical health.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So they are closely related. And it's important we distinguish mental illness as a significant and real medical disorder as well.
This was our first in what we hope will be an ongoing series on adolescence. We hope you join us again next month for more. For now, this is Peter Bermudes with Laura Stamboni for Arlington Public News.